All right, you beautiful bastards, strap yourselves in. Today we're going deep on none other than Vladimir freaking Putin.
Oh, we are.
From those commie-ridden streets of Leningrad to becoming Tsar of the Kremlin, this dude's story is more messed up than a Russian roulette tournament.
It is a remarkable journey, you're right, and one deeply intertwined with the tumultuous history of Russia itself.
Okay, so picture this little Vlad, fresh out of the womb, probably already eyeing up the neighborhood sandbox like it's some kind of goddamn territory to conquer. You think he was dreaming of nukes before he even knew what toilet training was?
Well, perhaps not quite that early. However, his childhood in post-war Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, was undeniably formative. Imagine a city rebuilding from the devastation of World War II, scarred but resilient. It's a context you can't ignore when trying to understand Putin's worldview.
Right, so the kid's seen some shit.
Yeah.
Grew up with the stench of iron and ashes. Probably thought breadlines were a gourmet buffet, so maybe that's where the whole make Russia great again BS gets baked into his tiny little brain.
It's certainly plausible that witnessing his nation's struggle instilled in him a profound sense of national pride, perhaps even a yearning for the lost grandeur of the Soviet era.
Yeah, and what better way to relive those glory days than by joining the frickin' KGB?
Right.
Talk about a school for paranoia and ass-kicking. 16 years learning how to disappear people and make problems vanish like a bad batch of vodka.
His time in the KGB undoubtedly honed his strategic thinking and gave him an intimate understanding of the levers of power. His posting in Dresden, East Germany during the Cold War would have been particularly significant. Imagine being a young officer witnessing the collapse of the Eastern Bloc firsthand.
Damn, talk about a front row seat to the end of an empire. You think he was sitting there sipping his borscht, thinking, I'm going to fix this shit show. I'm going to put Russia back on the damn map.
It's certainly possible that this period solidified his convictions and ambitions. And remember, the KGB was more than just an intelligence agency. It was a training ground for political operatives, for those who understood how to navigate the corridors of power.
Okay, so we've got our super spy all decked out in his finest trench coat and a head full of Cold War tactics. But how the hell does this dude go from sneaking around Berlin to running the whole damn show in Russia? Was it some kind of KGB black magic or just dumb luck?
Well, it wasn't exactly overnight. After the Soviet Union went belly up, Putin traded his spy gear for a suit and tie landing a gig as an advisor to the mayor of St. Petersburg. It was his first foray into the political arena, and let me tell you, he was a natural-born shark in those waters.
So he's like a chameleon blending into the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. But what's the play here? How does he go from City Hall to the Kremlin?
His rise was as swift as it was strategic. He caught the eye of Boris Yeltsin, who, let's face it, was about as stable as a drunk bear on roller skates. Yeltsin needed someone he could trust, someone who could bring order to the chaos that was post-Soviet Russia. And Putin, with his KGB pedigree and quiet ruthlessness, fit the bill perfectly.
Yeah. Yeltsin was a walk-and-talking hangover. So Putin slithers his way into the inner circle, becomes the president's right-hand man. Classic power move. But was it all just loyalty and good timing, or was there something more sinister brewing?
By 1998, Putin was appointed head of the FSB, the successor to the KGB, a return to his roots, you could say.
Back to his old stomping grounds, the spider back in its web. But here's where things get juicy. Yeltsin decides to call it quits on New Year's Eve, 1999. Talk about a party pooper.
And who does he choose as his successor? None other than Vladimir Putin?
Hold on, wait a minute. Yeltsin just hands over the keys to the kingdom like it's some kind of drunken New Year's resolution? What the hell was he thinking?
It was a move that shocked the world. Some believe Yeltsin saw in Putin a protector of his legacy and the interests of his inner circle. Others argue it was a desperate gamble by a failing leader. Whatever the reason, on that New Year's Eve, a new era began for Russia. The Putin era.
Holy shit, what a way to ring in the new millennium. But okay, the guy's in charge now. What's the first thing he does? Does he throw a vodka-fueled rager in Red Square? Declare war on America.
He acted decisively, that's for sure. One of his first moves was to target the oligarchs, those obscenely wealthy tycoons who had plundered Russia's resources during the chaotic post-Soviet period.
Taking on the oligarchs. Those guys were basically the Russian mafia with better suits. That's like poking a bear with a vodka bottle, ballsy as hell.
Indeed. Putin saw them as a threat to his power and the stability of the state. He launched investigations, froze assets, and effectively neutered their political influence.
Yeah, so he's not messing around. Putin comes in swinging, sending a message. There's a new sheriff in town, and this ain't no democracy picnic.
The message was clear. Putin was in control. But his agenda went beyond consolidating power. He implemented economic reforms aiming to stabilize the Russian economy. He tackled inflation, attracted foreign investment, and tried to rein in the rampant corruption that had plagued the country.
All right, so he's not just a power-hungry thug. He's got some brains behind those icy blue eyes. But did it work? Did he actually make Russia great again, or was it all just smoke and mirrors?
Well, under his leadership, the Russian economy did experience significant growth, fueled in part by high oil prices. The average Russians saw their living standards improve, and Putin's popularity soared. He was hailed as the savior of Russia, the man who brought back stability and prosperity after the turbulent 90s.
So he's got the economy humming, the oligarchs shitting their pants, and the people eating out of his hand. Not bad for a former KGB spook.
But here's the thing, there's always a but with this guy. How far was he willing to go to maintain this grip on power? Was it just about making Russia strong, or was it about something more sinister?
That, my friend, is the question that will lead us into the next part of our deep dive.
You bet your ass it will. We're just getting warmed up, folks. Stay tuned, because in part 2, we're going to peel back the layers of this onion and see what really stinks at the core of Putin's Russia. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back. Last time we left off with Putin firmly in control of Russia, having tamed the oligarchs and seemingly revived the economy. But as we all know, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and things were about to get a whole lot darker.
Darker, shit expert. We're talking about the guy who probably polishes his shoes with the tears of his enemies. What could be darker than that? Unless he's got a secret stash of baby seal fur hats or something.
Well, I can't speak to his fashion choices. His actions on the world stage certainly took a turn.
Oh, really?
We need to talk about his foreign policy.
Okay.
Buckle up, because it's a wild ride of geopolitical mind games, military muscle flexing, and enough double-crossing to make even a hardened KGB agent blush.
All right, hit me with it. What kind of shit is Putin stirring up beyond Russia's borders? Is he trying to conquer Europe? Start a new Cold War? Or maybe he's just bored and wants to see the world burn?
Well, let's start with the 2008 conflict in Georgia. You see, after the Soviet Union collapsed, these two breakaway regions, South Ossetia and Abkhazia, basically told Georgia to shove it. They wanted to be buddies with Russia instead, and Putin, ever the opportunist, saw his chance to stick it to the West and expand his influence.
So he sends in the tanks, right? Crushing those poor little Georgian freedom fighters like a cockroach under his boot. Typical Putin move, bully the weak, cower from the strong.
It was a swift and decisive military operation, yes. Yeah. Russian forces quickly overwhelmed the Georgian military and secured those breakaway regions. The West condemned the invasion, but ultimately they did little to stop it.
Of course, the West just sits there with their thumbs up their ass. They're all talk and no action when it comes to dealing with Putin. But hey, at least he didn't go full-blown nuclear, right? So Georgia was a taste of things to come, wasn't it? A little appetizer before the main course, which, if I remember correctly, was served up in Crimea.
You're absolutely right. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 was a game changer. Remember, Crimea was part of Ukraine, a country that had been inching closer and closer to the West, much to Putin's dismay. He saw this as a direct threat to Russia's interests, a betrayal even.
Betrayal? Come on, expert. The dude runs a country built on backstabbing and paranoia. Betrayal is like his morning coffee. But what's the play here? Does he just roll in with tanks and vodka and declare Crimea part of the motherland?
Well, it was more sophisticated than that, but not by much. First, he sends in these unmarked troops, little green men. They were called to seize control of key infrastructure and military bases. Then he backs a sham referendum where, surprise, surprise, the majority of Crimeans supposedly vote to join Russia.
A rigged election.
Yeah.
Shocking. I'm surprised he didn't just stuff the ballot boxes with pictures of his shirtless torso. The man loves a good propaganda show. But seriously, what the hell was the West thinking? Did they just roll over and let him take Crimea?
The West was caught off guard, and their response was largely limited to sanctions and diplomatic condemnation. Putin had calculated correctly. He knew they wouldn't risk a military confrontation over Crimea.
Yeah, Putin's got the West figured out. He knows they're all bark and no bite. But here's the thing that really grinds my gears. He sells this whole Crimea thing to the Russian people as some kind of patriotic victory. A restoration of their rightful territory. It's sickening.
You're touching upon a crucial element of Putin's strategy, the manipulation of nationalist sentiment. By portraying himself as the defender of Russia's historical lands and its people, he solidifies his power and deflects criticism.
Propaganda 101. The man's a master manipulator. He's got the Russian people convinced he's some kind of goddamn superhero, single-handedly restoring Russia to its former glory. But let's not forget about the other shit show Putin's been meddling in Syria. Talk about a clusterfuck of biblical proportions.
Ah, Syria. A conflict where the lines between good and evil are blurred, where proxy wars rage, and where countless innocent lives have been lost. Putin saw an opportunity to assert Russian influence in the Middle East, to project power beyond its traditional sphere.
And who better to side with than Bashar al-Assad, a dictator who makes Saddam Hussein look like a goddamn choir boy.
Ah!
What's the appeal there? Shared love of poisoning dissidents.
Syria has been a longtime ally of Russia, hosting a Russian naval base on its Mediterranean coast. Supporting Assad was a strategic move to maintain a foothold in the region and counter Western influence.
Right, because the world totally needs another power-hungry dictator calling the shots. But let's be real, expert, this whole Syria thing is just a giant dick-measuring contest between Putin and the West. They're playing with people's lives like it's some kind of goddamn Risk board game.
There's no denying the geopolitical complexities at play. The Syrian conflict is a proxy war with Russia and the West backing opposing sides, each vying for influence and control.
And let's not forget about Putin's favorite new toy, cyber warfare. The man's got his grubby little fingers all over the internet, hacking elections, spreading fake news, and generally making the world a more paranoid and distrustful place.
Russia's cyber capabilities are indeed sophisticated and concerning. They've been linked to interference in elections across the globe, from the United States to France to Germany. Their goal is to sow discord, undermine democratic institutions, and advance Russian interests.
So basically, Putin's like a troll on steroids sitting in his basement in Moscow, cackling maniacally as he watches the world burn. It's enough to make you want to ditch your smartphone and move to a goddamn cabin in the woods.
While the threat is real, we shouldn't succumb to paranoia. We need to be aware of these tactics to develop critical thinking skills and to demand accountability from our leaders. Remember, knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, my ass. Putin's got all the power, and he's not afraid to use it. He's playing chess while the rest of the world is still trying to figure out tic-tac-toe. So what's the next move, expert? What fresh hell is he going to unleash on the world?
To understand that, we need to delve deeper into the mind of the man himself. In Part 3, we'll explore Putin's worldview, his motivations, and what his vision for Russia's future holds for the rest of us.
Trust me, it's a journey into the heart of darkness you won't want to miss.
Oh, I live for this shit. Stay tuned, folks, because things are about to get real, and by real, I mean batshit crazy. Don't go anywhere. All right, you degenerates, welcome back to the final round of our Putin-palooza. We've seen him rise from the ashes of the Soviet Union like a phoenix made of vodka and spite. We've witnessed him crush his enemies, play puppet master with the economy, and throw shade at the West like it's going out of style. But the big question remains, what the hell is this guy actually trying to achieve? Does he have some grand plan beyond just being a power-hungry dick?
It's the question that keeps diplomats and intelligence agencies up at night, you're right.
Yeah.
What is the end game for Vladimir Putin?
Right.
Is he a master strategist with a vision for a new world order, or just a bully with a nuclear arsenal? Yeah, because let's be real, the guy's been running the show for over 2 decades. Yeah. He's got to be working towards something bigger than just collecting Fabergé eggs and posing for shirtless horseback riding photo shoots.
You're right, there's a sense of mission that permeates his actions. He consistently portrays himself as the restorer of Russia's greatness, the protector of its interests against a perpetually scheming West.
Right, the whole make Russia great again shtick.
Oh, yeah.
But what does that actually mean in practice? Is he trying to resurrect the Soviet Union, rebuild the Iron Curtain, or maybe he just wants to see the world burn in a glorious nuclear mushroom cloud?
While a return to Soviet-era communism seems unlikely, he clearly yearns for the global influence and respect that the USSR once commanded. He views the collapse of the Soviet Union as a historical injustice, a humiliation inflicted upon Russia by the West.
So it's a classic case of wounded ego on a national scale.
Yeah.
Like he's trying to compensate for some collective inferiority complex.
There's definitely an element of that. However, Putin's worldview is also rooted in a deeply ingrained Russian nationalism. He believes in the exceptionalism of the Russian people, their inherent right to a position of power on the world stage.
Russian exceptionalism.
Right.
It sounds like a load of bullshit to me. It's the same kind of dangerous rhetoric that leads to wars and oppression.
It's certainly a potent ideology, especially when wielded by an authoritarian leader. And Putin has masterfully exploited this nationalist fervor to consolidate his power and justify his aggressive actions both domestically and internationally.
So he's playing the nationalist card to rile up the masses and keep himself in power. Classic dictator move. But it's not just about stroking Russian egos, right? There's this whole anti-West paranoia that seems to fuel his every move.
Putin's relationship with the West is a complicated one, marked by deep-seated suspicion and mistrust. He views NATO expansion as an existential threat, a deliberate encirclement of Russia by hostile forces. He sees the U.S. and its allies as constantly meddling in Russia's affairs, supporting pro-democracy movements in former Soviet republics and trying to weaken its influence.
It's like a Cold War rerun, but with a 21st century twist. Instead of tanks rolling across Europe, we've got cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and economic sanctions. It's a whole new kind of warfare fought in the shadows with keyboards and algorithms.
Precisely. The nature of conflict has evolved, but the underlying tensions and mistrust remain. And the risk of miscalculation and escalation is ever present.
Escalation, you mean like a full-blown nuclear apocalypse? Because that's not exactly how I want to spend my weekend.
Nobody wants to see a nuclear confrontation, but the potential for things to spiral out of control is a real concern. The stakes are incredibly high.
So what the hell do we do? Do we just appease this megalomaniac and hope he doesn't decide to nuke us all back to the Stone Age? Or do we stand up to him and risk provoking a war that nobody can win?
It's a difficult balancing act. We need to be firm in defending our values and interests while also engaging in strategic dialogue and diplomacy. Finding that sweet spot between deterrence and de-escalation is crucial.
Diplomacy. You think talking to this guy's going to change anything? He's like a goddamn shark. He smells weakness and goes in for the kill.
Diplomacy is never easy, especially with a leader like Putin, but it's essential to maintain open channels of communication and to explore potential areas of cooperation, even if those are limited. Completely isolating Russia would be counterproductive and dangerous.
All right, fine, let the diplomats do their thing. But while they're busy sipping champagne and making polite conversations, what can we, the average folks, do? Are we just supposed to sit here and wait for the bombs to start falling?
Absolutely not. We need to stay informed and engaged. Understand the complexities of the issues, be critical of the information we consume, and hold our leaders accountable for their actions.
So no more mindlessly scrolling through social media, getting sucked into the echo chambers of outrage and misinformation.
Exactly. We need to be discerning consumers of information to seek out diverse perspectives and to challenge our own biases. We need to be active citizens engaged in our communities and advocating for policies that promote peace and stability.
Okay, I get it. Knowledge is power, blah, blah, blah. But you're telling me that me reading a few articles about Putin's latest shenanigans is going to make a difference.
Every action, no matter how small, contributes to a larger movement. When enough people raise their voices, demand accountability, and push for change, it creates a ripple effect that can reach even the highest corridors of power. Never underestimate the power of informed and engaged citizens.
All right, you've convinced me. It's time to stop bitching and start doing something. So what's the takeaway for our listeners, expert? What do they need to do to prepare for the Putin-shaped shitstorm that might be heading our way?
First and foremost, stay informed. Educate yourselves about the issues, understand the historical context, and be aware of the different perspectives at play. Second, engage in constructive dialogue. Talk to your friends, family, and communities about these issues. Challenge assumptions, encourage critical thinking. Third, get involved. Support organizations that are working to promote democracy, human rights, and peace. Contact your elected officials and make your voice heard.
All right, you're the expert, folks. It's time to wake the hell up and smell the borscht. The world's a dangerous place, and a lot of it has to do with the power-hungry maniac running Russia. We can't afford to be complacent. We need to be informed, engaged, and ready to fight for the future we want. And for God's sakes, if you see Putin riding a bear shirtless towards your town, run like hell. That's it for this deep dive into the life and times of Vladimir Putin.
It's been a fascinating journey, and as always, it's crucial to remember that the story isn't over. Putin's legacy is still being written, and it's up to each of us to stay informed, engaged, and ready to shape the future we want to see.
Until next time, stay frosty, you beautiful bastards.
Whisper.